The night was cold, and the wind howled through the abandoned streets. Ryan pulled his jacket closer, his breath visible in the chilly air. He had just finished his late shift and was heading home when he noticed something strange near an alleyway. A figure was crouched against the wall, hidden in the shadows. At first, Ryan thought it was a homeless person, but as he stepped closer, he realized something was wrong. The figure was shivering, its breathing uneven. Then, in the dim light, he saw something shocking. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes, large and glowing faintly, locked onto his. An alien. Ryan's heart pounded. Aliens weren't unheard of, but they mostly stayed in their own districts. What was she doing here? And more importantly, why did she look so weak? The alien girl tried to move but winced in pain. She clutched her side, her fingers pressing against a dark stain on her clothes. She was injured. For a moment, Ryan hesitated. Helping her could bring trouble. Maybe the authorities were looking for her. Maybe she was dangerous. But then, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and desperation. "Help me," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Ryan sighed. He couldn't just leave her like this. "Can you walk?" he asked, stepping closer. She shook her head slowly. He looked around. The street was empty, but that wouldn't last. If someone else found her, she might not be so lucky. Taking a deep breath, Ryan crouched down and carefully lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and she flinched at his touch, but she didn't resist. "All right, let's get you out of here," he muttered, glancing around one last time before carrying her away into the night. Little did he know, this single act of kindness would change his life forever. The human, Alex, stared at the strange alien girl sitting in front of him. Her silver eyes reflected the dim light of the small room. She looked weak, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the piece of bread he had given her. She hesitated for a moment, then took a careful bite. As soon as the food touched her tongue, her eyes widened in shock. She chewed slowly, as if trying to memorize the taste. Then, without a word, she ate the rest of the bread quickly, as if afraid someone might take it away. Alex watched her in silence. He had never seen an alien before, not like this. Her clothes were torn, and there were scratches on her arms. She had clearly been through a lot. "Do you want more?" he asked gently. The girl looked up, her silver eyes meeting his. For a second, she seemed unsure. Then, slowly, she nodded. Alex got up and walked to the small storage box in the corner of the room. He took out a protein bar and handed it to her. She took it carefully, unwrapping it with shaky fingers. "What's your name?" Alex asked as she ate. She hesitated. Then, in a soft voice, she said, "Vena." Alex nodded. "Vena. Nice to meet you." She didn't respond, but she kept staring at him, as if trying to understand him. "Why were you out there, alone?" Alex asked. "Are you lost?" Vena looked down, gripping the empty wrapper in her hands. I have nowhere to go." Her voice was quiet, almost broken. Alex frowned. Something about her words felt heavy. He didn't know her story, but he could tell she had suffered. "You can stay here for now," he said. "At least until you figure out what to do next." Vena looked at him with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe his words. You're not afraid of me." Alex chuckled. "You don't look very scary." For the first time, a small, almost invisible smile appeared on her lips. It was gone in an instant, but Alex noticed it. Outside, the wind howled through the night, but inside the small room, it was warm. Neither of them spoke for a while. Alex leaned back in his chair, watching Vena finish her meal. He didn't know who she was or why she was alone, but one thing was clear: she needed help. And for some reason, he had already decided to help her. The alien girl sat quietly, her large, glowing eyes fixed on the human in front of her. She still couldn't believe he had helped her. No human had ever done something like this before. Daniel placed a small plate of food in front of her. "You should eat," he said gently. She hesitated. Her people had always warned her about humans. They were unpredictable, dangerous even. But this one, he had saved her. He had carried her when she was too weak to walk, given her water when she was dehydrated. And now he was offering food. Her hunger was stronger than her fear. Slowly, she picked up a small piece and tasted it. Warm, soft. The flavors were unlike anything she had ever eaten, but it wasn't bad. Dangle watched her, amused. You like it? She nodded hesitantly. It is different. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated again. Sharing her name with a human felt strange. But at this point, she had no choice but to trust him. Sayari, she finally said. Daniel smiled. Nice to meet you, Sayari. There was a long pause before she spoke again. Why did you help me? Her voice was quiet, but her curiosity was clear. Daniel shrugged. Because you needed help. Sayari frowned. But I am not human. I am your enemy. Daniel sighed, leaning back in his chair. Who told you that? My people. Well, they're wrong, Daniel said simply. Not all humans are bad, just like not all of your kind are bad. Sayari looked down. His words made sense, but it was hard to believe. Everything she had been taught said humans were selfish creatures, but this human had risked himself to save her. She looked up at him again. You are different. Daniel laughed. I get that a lot. For the first time in a long while, Sayari felt something strange, a warmth in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. Maybe, just maybe, this human wasn't so bad after all. The night was quiet, but tension filled the air. The alien girl, still weak from hunger, sat near the small fire the human had made. Her glowing eyes watched him closely as he prepared a simple meal. She had never seen food being cooked like this before. You should eat, the human said, handing her a warm piece of bread. She hesitated but then took a small bite. Her eyes widened in surprise. It was soft, warm, and unlike anything she had tasted before. The taste melted in her mouth, bringing a strange comfort she had not felt in a long time. The human smiled. Good, right? She nodded slowly, then took another bite, chewing carefully. It was different from the raw plants and cold food she was used to. This was made with care, with warmth. She felt something strange inside her chest, a feeling she did not understand. As she ate, the human sat back and looked up at the stars. So, what happened to you? He finally asked. The alien girl lowered her eyes, gripping the bread tightly. My home was destroyed, she said softly. I had nowhere to go. I ran, and kept running until I had nothing left. The human frowned. He could hear the pain in her voice. That's awful, he said. But you're safe now. She looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with emotions. Why are you helping me? She asked. I am not like you. I am an outsider, a stranger. The human shrugged. Doesn't matter. You're hungry, you need help, and I was here. That's enough reason. The alien girl stared at him for a long moment. In her world, kindness was rare. Everything was about survival, power, and control. But this human, he gave without expecting anything in return. She finished the bread, warmth spreading through her tired body. Thank you, she whispered. The human smiled. Get some rest. We'll figure out what to do next in the morning. For the first time in a long time, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found someone she could trust. The room was silent except for the gentle hum of the ventilation system. Kiran watched as the alien girl, Zayla, sat on the edge of the bed, deep in thought. Her silver-blue skin shimmered under the dim light, and her glowing violet eyes darted toward him with uncertainty. You don't have to worry, Kiran said softly. You're safe here. Zayla hesitated before speaking. Your kindness, it confuses me, human. Kiran chuckled. I get that a lot. He leaned back against the chair. But really, Helping someone in need isn't a big deal. Zayla's sharp gaze met his. Among my kind, nothing is given without expectation. But you ask for nothing. Kiran shrugged. Not everything has to be a trade. She looked down, tracing patterns on the fabric of the blanket. Back on my home planet, weakness is punished. If you cannot stand, you are left behind. Kiran frowned. That's harsh. It is survival. Zayla's voice was quiet, almost distant. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Kiran spoke, his voice warm. Well, on Earth, we take care of each other. We help when we can. Zayla's expression softened. Strange, yet comforting. Just then, a noise came from outside. The sound of footsteps approaching. Zayla's body tensed, her sharp claws slightly extending. Kiran noticed and quickly reassured her. It's just my friend, Ravi. He's bringing food. Zayla's claws retracted, but she remained alert. A second later, the door creaked open, and Ravi stepped in with a tray of food. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Zayla. Whoa, Ravi said, looking between them. You weren't joking about the alien guest. Kiran smirked. Nope. Ravi, meet Zayla. Zayla, this is Ravi, my best friend. Zayla tilted her head. Best friend. Kiran nodded. Someone who always has your back, no matter what. Ravi placed the food on the table and grinned. That's right. And I brought extra food in case she's hungry. Zayla's eyes flickered with something unreadable, but she reached for a small fruit, hesitating before taking a bite. Her glowing eyes widened slightly. This is good. Ravi laughed. Glad you like it. For the first time since she arrived, Zayla seemed at ease. Kiran watched her, realizing something. Maybe, just maybe, trust could be built, one step at a time. The dim light of the underground chamber flickered as the alien girl, Zahira, struggled to keep her balance. Her breathing was uneven, and the exhaustion in her glowing eyes was evident. The human, Daniel, noticed this immediately. You need to rest, he said firmly. Zahira shook her head. No, we must move. They will find us. Daniel knew she was right. The ones chasing them were relentless. But if she collapsed from exhaustion, they wouldn't stand a chance. He quickly scanned the area and spotted a small alcove hidden behind a pile of metal scraps. Come on, he whispered, leading her there. We'll hide for a while. She hesitated but followed. The moment they settled in, Zahira leaned against the wall, her body trembling. Daniel pulled out a small energy bar from his pocket and handed it to her. Eat this, he said. She looked at it suspiciously. Human food. Yeah, but it'll help. Trust me. After a moment of hesitation, she took a small bite. Her expression changed. It's strange, but not bad. Daniel chuckled. That's the best review I've heard all day. A brief silence filled the space. For the first time in days, they had a moment to breathe. But danger was still close. The distant echoes of footsteps sent a chill down their spines. Zahira tensed. They're here. Daniel clenched his fists. He knew they couldn't stay hidden for long. Then an idea struck him. He looked at the pile of broken devices around them and quickly began putting something together. What are you doing? Zahira asked. Buying us time, he replied, connecting a few wires and small power cells. Within moments, he had crafted a makeshift sonic disruptor. It wouldn't last long, but it could confuse their pursuers. Hold your ears, he warned. A sharp, high-pitched sound filled the chamber, bouncing off the walls. Zahira winced but held still. The footsteps outside suddenly stopped, followed by confused voices. It worked, she whispered. Daniel grabbed her hand. Let's go, before they figure it out. Without hesitation, they slipped out of the alcove and into the darkness of the tunnels. They didn't have much time, but for now, they had a chance. And sometimes, a chance was all they needed. The days that followed the attack felt like a blur to Jay. The sounds of the alien cries still echoed in his mind, but with the weight of the battle lifted, something else started to emerge. Hope. He had never expected to be part of something so big, let alone survive it. He spent hours in the shelter with Lyra, talking about everything and nothing. Lyra was slowly starting to trust him more, and the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Her bright eyes would light up whenever she spoke about her home planet, the distant stars, and the rich cultures of her people. Jay had always been curious about space, but hearing her stories made him feel like he had just scratched the surface. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a soft orange glow over the horizon, Lyra stood by the window, her silhouette framed against the fading light. She had been quiet for a while, lost in thought. Jay, noticing her stillness, approached her slowly. "Lyra," he asked, his voice soft but steady, "what's on your mind?" She turned to face him, her expression serious yet kind. "I have been thinking," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what will happen next. My people, they are out there. And I am still not sure if I'm safe." Jay's heart sank. He knew that her survival meant more than just their shelter. There were consequences. He reached out and gently took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "You don't have to worry about them right now," he said with a reassuring smile. "You're safe here with me, and we'll figure out the rest together." Lyra's eyes softened as she looked at him. She had never met anyone like Jay before. His determination to protect her, even when he knew little about her world, was something she hadn't expected from a human. In her world, survival was a constant struggle, and trust was a luxury few could afford. Yet here, with Jay, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Peace. I trust you," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what happens when my people come looking for me? What will they do to you?" Jay paused, unsure of how to respond. He had never thought of that before. But then, a thought hit him. He had already faced the aliens before. He had survived the attack, helped Lyra escape, and now, he would protect her no matter what came next. "We'll face it together," he said firmly, looking into her eyes. "No matter who comes, we stand together." Lyra smiled, her heart filled with warmth. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: she wasn't alone. As the night descended, they sat together, watching the stars appear in the sky above them. And in that peaceful moment, they both understood. No matter what happened next, their journey had only just begun. After weeks of living with the alien girl, her true nature had started to become clearer to him. At first, he had thought she was just a companion, an unexpected addition to his life that he hadn't known he needed. But the more time they spent together, the more he realized there was something extraordinary about her. She wasn't just any alien. Her soft blue eyes held a depth of wisdom that seemed beyond her years. Her movements were graceful, but there was an underlying strength in the way she carried herself. And there was always an air of mystery about her, one that drew him in even more. He had tried to understand her better, but she was always elusive, always keeping a part of herself hidden. But today, as he sat across from her at the small table in their shared space, everything changed. She had been quiet all morning, a strange look in her eyes as if she was wrestling with something. For a moment, he had been afraid she was upset with him. But then she spoke, her voice softer than usual. "You've been so kind to me," she said, her gaze not meeting his. "But there's something I have to tell you, something I've been hiding." He leaned forward, his heart racing with anticipation. It was rare for her to show any sign of vulnerability, so he knew this was important. "What is it?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out something small and metallic. It was a necklace, intricately designed with strange symbols etched into the surface. It shimmered in the light, almost as if it were alive. This, she said, holding it out for him to see, is a part of who I really am. He stared at it, not understanding at first. But as she continued, the pieces slowly began to fit together. I'm not just an alien, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm the last of my kind. My people. We were wiped out in a war. This necklace is all that's left of them. The revelation hit him like a tidal wave. He had always known there was something different about her. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. But why didn't you tell me earlier? He asked, feeling the surge of emotions, confusion, sadness, and awe. I couldn't, she replied, her eyes finally meeting his. I was afraid you wouldn't want me anymore. I thought I'd be a burden to you. But now that I spent time with you, I know you won't turn away. Her words settled in his heart, and for the first time, he understood the weight of what she had been carrying. She hadn't just been hiding her past. She had been hiding the pain of losing everything, of being the last survivor of a war she couldn't control. I don't want you to hide anymore, he said gently, reaching out and taking her hand in his. You're not a burden. You're important to me. Her eyes softened, and a smile tugged at her lips. Thank you for accepting me, even when I didn't think I deserved it. In that moment, he realized that this alien girl wasn't just a strange being from another world. She was someone who had suffered, someone who needed love and understanding, just like anyone else. And he was determined to give her that. No matter what the future held, they would face it together. After the alien woman's unexpected arrival, everything had changed. The human, whose life had been simple until now, found himself thrust into a world he couldn't fully understand. The weight of her presence was undeniable, yet so was the undeniable pull of his heart. Every moment with her left him more confused, but also more captivated. She was a mystery, an enigma wrapped in fear and desire. The alien woman was hiding so much from him, her eyes constantly darting around, as if afraid to trust anyone. Yet, she trusted him. She needed his help in a way no one else could provide. Her every word made him question what was real and what wasn't. One evening after dinner, she pulled him aside, her gaze intense but softer than usual. Her hand shook slightly, betraying the calm she tried so hard to project. I need to tell you something, she whispered, almost too quietly for him to hear. Something that could change everything. The human's heart skipped a beat. He had been waiting for this moment, uncertain yet ready to hear what she had to say. Whatever it is, he started, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. You can tell me. Her eyes locked with his, her breath catching in her throat. She stepped closer, taking a deep breath before speaking again. I'm not just anyone, she began, her voice trembling now. I am the key to something dangerous. You need to decide if you're ready to get involved in this. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, their weight almost suffocating. He wanted to ask more, wanted to demand answers, but something in the way she looked at him stopped him. She was begging for his trust, but with it came a price he wasn't sure he could pay. Why me? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The alien woman's face softened, her gaze showing a mixture of pain and longing. Because I have no one else, and because you're different. You're human, but your heart, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. She paused, looking down at the ground, as if unsure whether to continue. I can't promise you that this will be easy, she said, but I need you to decide. Will you help me, or walk away from all of this? He felt the pressure of the decision settle in his chest, the weight of it more than he had ever felt. What did it mean to help her? Would he be putting himself in danger? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but one thing was clear. He couldn't walk away from her now. His heart told him to stay, to help, to be the person she needed. I'm in, he said with more conviction than he felt. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Her eyes glowed with a mix of relief and gratitude. For the first time she smiled. And for that brief moment, the world seemed a little less complicated. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The alien woman stood near the ancient pedestal, her eyes fixed on the sword embedded in a stone base. The blade gleamed in the dim light of the distant stars, its edge etched with symbols that no one had understood in centuries. The air was heavy with the weight of history, as if the sword was waiting for something or someone. "You're sure about this?" the alien girl asked, her voice full of doubt. "No one, not even the strongest of my people, has ever managed to lift it." The human stood beside her, his face a mixture of determination and curiosity. He had seen many challenges in his life, but nothing quite like this. "I've faced impossible odds before," he replied, his eyes focused on the blade. "I'm going to try." The alien woman shook her head, her long, glowing hair shimmering under the moonlight. She knew her species' history well, and this sword was a symbol of immense power, reserved for only the most skilled and worthy. To her, it seemed like an impossible task for a mere human. But there was something about him, something that made her wonder if he might just be the one to defy the odds. With a steady breath, the human reached out and placed his hand on the sword's hilt. The moment his fingers made contact, a low hum vibrated through the air, as if the sword itself was alive and reacting to his touch. The alien girl took a step back, eyes wide with astonishment. She had seen countless beings try to wield this blade, but none had ever succeeded. The human gripped the hilt firmly and pulled. The stone around the sword began to tremble. The alien girl's heart raced as she watched, her breath caught in her chest. Could it be? Could he truly lift the blade? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a final surge of strength, the human pulled the sword free from the stone. The alien girl gasped, her mouth falling open in disbelief. The sword was now in his hands, glowing even brighter than before. It was as if the weapon itself recognized the strength and resolve that lay within him. You did it," she whispered, still unable to comprehend what had just happened. The human, breathing heavily but grinning, looked at the alien girl. "Told you I could do it." She stared at him in awe, a mixture of admiration and something else flickering in her eyes. For the first time, she saw the human not as someone weak, but as someone who could truly stand alongside her people, someone who could challenge fate itself. The sword pulsed in the human's hand, its power radiating through the air. He could feel it now, the ancient energy that had been dormant for centuries, and he knew that this moment would change everything. What came next was unknown, but he was ready to face it, no matter what. As the alien girl stepped closer, her gaze never leaving the sword, she finally spoke, her voice full of respect. "You've proven yourself, human. You are worthy." And in that moment, both of them understood that this was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure. Together, they would face whatever came next.